I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Clerk.
Government business notice of motion number 2, standing in the name of Senator Fifield, relating to the rotation of the Senate under section 13 of the Constitution.
Minister.
Mr President, I move the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Senator Di Natale.
As I also seek leave to,
you can speak to
the motion. Yes, I don't need to speak leave to this either. Look, I'd just like to draw the Senate's attention to the method of allocating Senate terms that's being applied in this motion. It's not the countback method that this Senate has previously indicated that should be the appropriate method for electing senators. The Labor and Liberal parties have both previously supported the much fairer method advocated by the Australian Electoral Commission. Yet, disappointingly, but not surprisingly, when it does come to the crunch, they have gone back to a method that really has been adopted out of narrow self-interest. We know that the countback method is the fairer, more democratic method of the two. We know that the order of election, which is the method that's being used in allocating Senate terms in this case, we know that it does create serious anomalies in preferential voting like ours. That's precisely why moving to a countback process was the recommendation of the 1983 Joint Select Committee on Electoral Reform. The Commonwealth Electoral Act was even amended to authorise the AEC to conduct a countback of the Senate vote. So ultimately this is a decision that's in our hands. It is a deliberate choice of this Senate to disregard the more democratic process that more closely reflects the will of voters. Senator Button and indeed Senator Faulkner, who I had the pleasure of working with during my early years in this parliament, somebody of whom I have tremendous respect for, they were both champions of the countback method. So it is disappointing to see Labor supporting this motion. They're not the only ones. We saw Senator Ronaldson move and successfully pass the motion on behalf of the coalition in 2010. It comes back to something that we've said on a number of occasions. There's nothing that brings the old parties, the Labor and Liberal Party, closer together than ensuring they protect their cosy little duopoly. And here we are again, voting together to stop diverse voices in the parliament. The Coles and Woolies of politics, as I've said before. The outcome of this motion has clearly been predetermined by both the Labor and Liberal parties, but we will continue to advocate for the recount method, regardless of who it benefits, because it is the fairer method.
Thank you, Senator Di Natale. Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Mr President. I wish to make some brief remarks in contribution to this debate and in support of the motion. And the point to be made, Mr President, is that the motion proposed by Senator Fifield is consistent with every single precedent adopted by this chamber following a double dissolution. After the 1914, 1951, 1974, 1975, 1983 and 1987 double dissolutions, in other words, all of the double dissolution elections that have occurred since Federation, when the appropriate operation of section 13 of the Constitution, which is the provision that provides for the rotation of senators, had to be considered by this chamber, the order of election principle was adopted. Now, it is true, Senator Di Natale, as you say, that in 1998, not after a double dissolution, Senator Faulkner advocated for the countback method. That is true. That is a matter about which the Labor Party might wish to say something. But nevertheless, that was not after a double dissolution. The motion that Senator Fifield has moved is consistent with every single constitutional precedent, and of course the relevant section of the Constitution, section 13, remains in the form it has always taken since 1901. Finally, Senator Di Natale, can I correct something you said? You said that the Australian Electoral Commission advocated for the countback method. The Australian Electoral Commission does not advocate for anything. The Australian Electoral Commission merely conducts the count. The safest course for this chamber to adopt is the course consistent with each of the previous 6 double dissolutions and the division of the chamber in the subsequent term?
Thank you, Senator Brandis. Senator Leyonhjelm.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to address this matter. I don't find it at all persuasive that Senator Brandis refers to precedent in this instance. Precedent doesn't necessarily make it fair or legitimate or avoid injustice. There is a legislated alternative in the Electoral Act which allows for the allocation of terms on the basis of the assumption that they would have been elected under half Senate results. It seems to me that this motion is based on a certain outcome in terms of who will sit for 6 years and who will sit for 3 years, and it's worked back from that position. And the option of the motion envisaged in the motion is the outcome from that, is the result of that end result that's been chosen. I want to place on the record my disagreement with the motion. If there's a division on it, I'll vote against it, but nonetheless I want to record the fact that I don't approve.
Thank you, Senator Leyonhjelm. Senator Hinch.
Mr. President, this is not my first speech, and I have taken my no-dos. I think this is a dirty stitch-up deal between the government and the Labor Party. The fix was in from the day of the election, and I think that in this deal you have betrayed more than 200,000 voters in Victoria, in my case. In the case of Senator Rhiannon, you've betrayed the voters of New South Wales. Because this, under the AEC, under the S282, that Prime Minister Hawke said was a fair way to reflect what happens after double dissolution. A fair way to do it. I should get 6 years and Senator Rhiannon should get 6 years. And we're going to get 3. Now, the AEC report which was tabled last night, 2821 says, where the scrutiny in an election of senators for a state held following a dissolution of the Senate under Section 57 of the Constitution has been completed, the Australian electoral officer for that state shall conduct a recount of the ballot papers in the election in accordance with subsections 2737 to 30. And in subsection 2738, quote, half, unquote, were inserted before the number of candidates. Now, the whole point of this method was so after a double dissolution, the result best resembled a regular half-Senate election. Now, I'm told by Liberal Party people in Victoria that the vote that I got, I actually would have got elected and be in this place if you'd had a half-Senate instead of a double dissolution. And the AEC, in their recount, in that report, they say this is the way you should have elected senators for 6-year terms. 1, Mitch Fifield. 2, Kim Carr. 3, Richard Di Natale. 4, Bridget McKenzie. 5, Stephen Conroy. And 6, Darren Hinch. That's the way the people of Victoria voted on July the 2nd. And you did this dirty little stitch-up to try and get one more. We said, yeah, let's do a deal here. We'll put one more Labor senator up in New South Wales. We'll put one more Lib up in Victoria. That gives us one more each. Isn't that great? Now, it is wrong. It is unfair. And in this place, of all places, you should respect democracy in the way that the voters of Victoria said you should. And this is not for me personally. It's for somebody who comes after me. I mean, I just think it is wrong. And I know it's not going to work. I said the stitch-up was done the same way that the government made the deal to try and get rid of the minor parties earlier this year, and that worked fine, didn't it? All I want to say, I don't want to take up the full 20 minutes, I just want to say it is wrong. If the vote goes against us, okay, I'm here for 3 years. I've been sacked 16 times, so if the voters of Victoria want to sack me a 17th time, they will do it. But my plan is to go back there in 3 years' time. If the vote goes against us, get re-elected, do 6 years and leave here after 9 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hinch. Senator Dastyari.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to echo the sentiments of the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Brandis. I think it's one of the quirks of this chamber that it is this chamber that is responsible for making these types of decisions, and naturally when we're making these decisions there will be those who will miss out by the decisions that are made. I do want to echo, though, that I think two of the points that were made by Senator Brandis. Firstly, that this is the method that has always been used for making these types of determinations in the past. And secondly, there is a test that we have to apply, and that is what is a reasonable and sensible process. And the idea that when there are 12 senators elected, the first 6 would serve for a longer period than the second 6 is a simple, transparent way of making these decisions. That being said, again, I think it is somewhat quirky that it is the Senate that makes this decision about itself.
Thank you, Senator Dastyari. Senator Xenophon.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I indicate my support for the position set out by Senator Hinch? Can I say that in terms of the NXT, we are not affected either way by this, but there is an important principle in respect of this, and that is we legislated to have a process in place. Of course, the Senate can override it, as is the Senate's right. But really, I think the litmus test, if you like, the pub test in terms of what is fair, is what would have happened if there was how would this have played out if it was as though it was a half-Senate election. I think that clearly, in this case, that Senator Hinch would have been elected for a 6-year term. We did go through a legislative process many years ago that was anticipated this. It can be overridden by the Senate, but I think that this is fundamentally unfair, and that's why I support the position of Senator Hinch and other crossbenchers in relation to this. We had a legislative reform. That legislative reform ought to be respected, even though it can be overridden by the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Xenophon. The question is the motion moved by Senator Fifield be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells. No. We did the noes have it. Yep. Thank you, Senator Hinch. A division has been called, so we'll be able to divide. Lock the doors. The question is that the motion moved by Senator Fifield concerning the rotation of senators for the purposes of section 13 of the Constitution be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left of the chair. I appoint Senator Bushby teller for the ayes, Senator Siewert teller for the noes. Order. There being 50 ayes and 15 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I call the clerk.